Hello, you've tuned to this week's episode of Next Steps Forward, and I'm your host, Chris Meek. As always, it's an honor to have you with us. Next Steps Forward is committed to helping others achieve more than ever while experiencing greater personal empowerment and well-being. Before I introduce today's guest, we must take a moment to pause and reflect on the tragic events of the past few days. Words are never enough, and yet words are all we have at a moment like this as we grapple with the most recent senseless mass shootings. One in which the motive is still unknown, the second inspired by the poison of anti-Semitism. Here in America, a gunman who is still at large killed 2 students who had so much of their promising lives yet to live, and wounded 9 others at Brown University in Providence on Saturday. Half a world away, the darkness of pure evil descended on Australia's popular Bondi Beach as Jews observed the start of Hanukkah, a sacred season centered on light, resilience, and hope. A father and son, inspired by the violent, hateful ideology of ISIS, murdered 16 people, including 2 children, and wounded 42 others. We grieve with the victims' families, friends, and communities, and stand with all those who pray that humanity will triumph over hate. Our special guest today is Carolyn Sharp, a licensed independent clinical social worker and a nationally recognized relationship expert. Carolyn has more than 30 years of experience helping couples, individuals, and teams build resilient connections. In 2005, she launched her private practice, specializing in high-conflict couples therapy. She's also the award-winning author of Fire It Up, 4 Secrets to Reigniting Intimacy and Joy in Your Relationship, and is a Psychology Today columnist. Carolyn Sharp, welcome to Next Steps Forward.
Thanks so much for having me, Chris, and thank you for that beautiful acknowledgement of what has taken place in the last couple of days.
No, thank you. And I appreciate you giving me the grace to do that. So, Carolyn, I think we'll call this Upside Down Tuesday because I normally like to start by asking guests about their careers, but I'm looking forward to that later in our conversation. And that's because intimacy is such an intriguing and mysterious topic for so many people. And intimacy, what it is, how to create it, and how to keep that flame burning in a relationship really seems to be the foundation around which so much of your work revolves. Mm-hmm. So let's start there. In your view, what does true intimacy in a long-term relationship really look like? And how do we know if intimacy really exists in our relationships?
Mm-hmm. Well, some of this, probably be an annoying answer, but some of it is defined by the people themselves. So what it feels like for me in my relationship, what it feels like for you in your relationship, it's going to be different. But for me, how I define intimacy, real intimacy, is about feeling and being truly known in our relationships. And that can be on a multiple of levels: emotionally, intellectually, physically, sexually, being really known and seen and appreciated. And so it's a moving target, if you will, because we are, as humans, we are continually changing and growing and evolving. So a truly intimate relationship is one where there is space to change and grow in the many messy ways that humans change and grow. It's what makes my work so fascinating, because people are always surprising me in new and different ways.
And I guess another question on that as a follow-up is, is intimacy something that we're born with in terms of needing and wanting, or is it something we learn as we grow older, as teenagers and adults?
That's a great question. Again, depending on the family environment, we are certainly intimately known by our parents. And if that is nurtured and supported in that family culture, there can be intimacy throughout that family. Different cultures feel differently about that. They're different depending on the generation you grew up and the culture you grew up. Some parents may have and this will probably be familiar to you, the sort of seen and not heard idea of parenting that has evolved to a more egalitarian, and it swings too far in one direction and then back in another. So it depends on the family that we grow up in, whether intimacy and being known and understood is something that is supported, or whether it's, you keep your internal world over there and don't bring that up over here. It varies so greatly across families and across cultures.
Well, and I'm snickering and smirking as you talked about that being seen and not heard. So my viewers and listeners know that I'm an only child raised by divorced parents, my single mom. And I spent the first 10 or 11 years living with my grandparents as well as my mother. And, my grandfather was the old school Archie Bunker. And he was my real male role model. But it was also that, you're seen and not heard. But I'm smirking because I would remember at Thanksgiving and Christmas, the family would come to my grandparents' house, and my younger cousins, about a year and a half younger, who's also about 5 inches taller than me, and I'm 6'3", his father would always say, "I'll give you 50 cents if you go play in traffic." And so it's the same concept of just like, be seen and not heard, and just, go over there type of thing. So generations are certainly different now in that sense. And he would certainly not say, "Go play in traffic."
Yes.
But it's just interesting how the generations change and that mindset evolves and change and all of that. I'm assuming that the intimacy we're talking about is different from sexual connection. And how does intimacy differ from sexual connection? Is emotional intimacy equally important or even more important than sexual connection?
Again, it's going to vary by couple, but American culture is funky around sexuality and sexual intimacy. And intimacy, the word, is often used euphemistically to reference sexual intimacy. So I'll have couples and say, "Well, we're not intimate anymore." And I have to clarify, are you talking about your sexual relationship, or are you talking about your emotional relationship? And so we mistakenly use those terms interchangeably. I think that emotional intimacy is the foundation for a really rich and deep sexual connection, whereas you can be sexually intimate, physically intimate, and not be emotionally intimate. You can't really have a deep physical connection without there being emotional connection. It can be satisfying, but it's not going to be deep and rich and evolving without that emotional connection. So I think emotional intimacy is really the underpinning of deep health in a long-term committed intimate relationship.
At the start of that response, you talked about how Americans view intimacy and sexuality different than other parts of the world. And I'll specifically reference Europe because they're much more open about that. And they always have been. For whatever the reason is, I'm not sure. My wife spent a year in France, and she, certainly understood and saw that firsthand. Why is that? Do you have any sense of that? And then, maybe this part two is, how do we change that narrative, or can we change that narrative without putting you out of business here in the U.S. In terms of having that dual pronged or dual definition of what intimacy means?
Well, I think, and again, I mean, it's, Europe isn't a monolith. There's lots of different cultures and sort of maybe along the funny lines of tomato Europe and potato Europe, Northern Europe versus Southern Europe, that it varies greatly in terms of the openness and fluidity of sexuality being a normal part of discussion and growth versus it being a dirty or a secret or all that sort of stuff. And where I trace it to in the reading and work I've done, it comes down to sort of religious beliefs about sexuality and about romance, even about what belongs in marriage and what doesn't, what belongs outside of marriage and doesn't, and all of the beliefs about what a healthy relationship consists of. So where in certain cultures it is normalized to teach kids about sexuality from a young age, in others that's an adult thing and that's a private thing, and we don't talk about that. Those sorts of beliefs pervade. We can absolutely do things about that. And sex for this reason is one of my favorite things to talk about with couples, because there is so much gunk about, oh, we shouldn't talk about that, or it's dirty, or it's wrong, or it's bad. So many couples don't even know how to talk about sex, what they like, what they don't, what works, what doesn't, that it's really fun to normalize it and make it safe for couples to talk about, because it has a pretty direct transformational effect to make it safe to just name, "I don't really like that," or "that isn't fun for me," or whatever. The freedom that comes in being able to talk about it is so powerful. But first we have to, like all things, we have to acknowledge the problem that exists. and this is sort of part and parcel of what I do, to normalize that it is challenging, that I inherited this belief system about sexuality or talking about things or about being a man or being a woman. I inherited this. This is what I was taught, either explicitly or implicitly. And so this is how I view that. Now that I know that, I can choose, do I want to stay in this place of this is how I orient to sexuality or relationships or communication or accountability or honesty or whatever? Do I want to stay here, or do I want to move somewhere else, transform my relationship to that part of our life together? And it is entirely possible to create transformation there. And it's really fun to help couples get there. And I have no fear about being, retired because we don't need it, because relationships are, without question, the hardest thing we do as adults. It is the hardest skill. Everyone takes it for granted that it should just be easy, that if you have to work on your relationship, it means something bad about you or your relationship or your partner. And it is the hardest thing we do. And we all should have support in doing it well. Every one of us.
Saying I do is the easy part.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
You just mentioned the freedom to talk about sexuality and intimacy. Do you find that we as Americans, we're just talking about America versus Europe or other cultures, do you think we have difficulty, freely or openly talking about sexuality or intimacy, just as general society or population?
That's been my experience. And I think it's actually, I think we're having greater difficulty talking in general, because of how binary, how divided we have grown. There's we're moving further and further away from the gray and the middle, the in-between, between right and wrong, between good and bad. And so as we make people that are different from us more wrong, we create less safety for anything that's outside the quote unquote normal, the quote unquote mainstream, the quote unquote traditional. Now we can't, if being gay is bad, being trans is bad, being Republican is bad, being anything is bad, then we can't safely talk about, hey, I was thinking about this and wondering about that. Now you're going to tell me I'm bad for even having that thought, that question. We're shutting things down more and more. So as we've grown more and more divided, I think things have gotten harder and harder to talk about. And I have seen that reflected in my office, in my sessions with couples, the fear that exists out there about all the things, all the changes that are taking place, all the threats to various people, whether you align or don't align. It infiltrates, and people are feeling, smaller and less safe, just voicing any opinions they have, whether it's, I don't like your potatoes anymore, to, hey, I want to try a different position in the bedroom. Couples are more and more tentative. So I'm seeing it impact every area of our life.
A little off topic, but I'm glad you raised that concept of the gray area and the disagreement. Mm-hmm. I'm working on a project with another clinical psychologist, and they lean a little bit one way politically. I lean a little bit the other way politically. And you talked about that middle, and the project we're working on, we're calling it that messy middle, mm-hmm. where you can't have your own opinion without being, to your point, chastised, mm-hmm. attacked, mm-hmm. whatever it is, because we've become so polarized mm-hmm. on, to your point, I don't like your potatoes anymore, or I don't like that shade of red jacket you're wearing, or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And so we're trying to come up, we have an idea of what we're going to do, or try to address that, but mm-hmm. it's unfortunate that you can no longer have a civil conversation over a cup of coffee or Thanksgiving dinner or whatever it is. And, our social media streams feed us what we want it to feed us. And so they're the worst things that are out there. No offense to those in those businesses or those who invest in those, but the algorithms are there to tell us what we want to hear. Mm-hmm. And there's no longer a truth, because the networks tell us what we want to hear, because that's the station we tune into, because that's what we want to hear. Mm-hmm. As opposed to turning off the TV and you and I have a conversation, mm-hmm. and you say, hey, Chris, I don't like that color blue t-shirt you're wearing, and here's the reason why. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, again, way off topic, but I appreciate you raising that, because that just solidifies the point of us and why we're trying to address that. So thank you for letting me get on my soapbox there for a minute.
I was just, on the TEDx stage on Sunday night, talking to that very thing and how it is really, and I talk about this in my book, and I talk about this a lot with couples. We have two competing drives living in us all the time. One is connection, one is survival. And this binary and this lack of messy middle makes us go further into the survival drive of protect myself, stay safe, stay right, stay alive, and further away from the need we have. We all need human connection. We're physically dependent on it, and we're creating less and less opportunities because they see you wearing your red hat or your blue hat, and I instantly go, you're not someone I'm going to connect with, you're not safe for me. And we lose the ability to even just smile across a crowded room at someone who's wearing a t-shirt that offends us, or whatever. And the loss to all of us is profound, and quite frankly dangerous physiologically. There's lots and lots and lots of studies, which you'll probably do as part of your project, of the impact of loneliness on our health. It's not something to just brush away, that all right, well, good riddance, I don't need to be connected to people that believe X or Y. And well, in fact, you lose something when you can't smile across a room at somebody, even if they believe something that is antithetical to your whole life.
And you think that was something that we would have learned with COVID? Yet we've completely forgotten about it, right? That was a lifetime ago. It was 5 years ago. We reopened, call it 2.5 years ago. And now we've forgotten about it.
Yep. And we think we're getting our connection needs met through social media, which you referenced before, that scrolling social media and seeing what Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce are up to, that's meeting my emotional connection needs, because, and the algorithm builders know it gives me a serotonin boost. So I think I'm good. You're in fact really not good. And it's scary. So anyway, we're going way.
We'll get back on topic. I'm sorry. I took
No,
you
it's great. I love talking about
apologize.
this. I could talk about this all day long, and that's what like my book is for couples, but really my secret hope is that it inspires people to invest in all of their relationships differently, to get curious in all the areas rather than just isolate in what we think we know is right.
Well, I think as a follow-up to that, getting back on topic, a big part of intimacy is quite simply communication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The more you open up to somebody, the more that you trust that individual and they trust you, the more intimate you can become in any facet of life, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so we'll get into that in a bit. Many couples say that over time, they start to feel just like roommates.
Mm-hmm.
What's the major cause or causes of intimacy devolving into just roommates?
It is taking the relationship for granted, putting it last on the list of tasks to attend to, and thinking the assumption that the relationship is just good. It'll take care of itself. We don't need to pay any special attention. That intimacy just exists, and you get married, and then you've got an intimate partner for the rest of your life, emotionally, physically, sexually, all of those areas. You don't need to tend to it. So we just take the relationship for granted. We let it go to the last thing. We tend to our work and our kids and our family and our home. And then by 10 o'clock at night, we're dead exhausted and we go to sleep without ever acknowledging, addressing, feeding the relationship. So that is what over time kills intimacy, because it doesn't live unless you feed it. You need to feed it communication. You need to feed it safety. You need to feed it care and feeding whatever your relationship needs. Some people need affection. Some people need verbal communication. Other people need, activities, play. Everybody is different in terms of what their relationship needs to keep that piece alive.
What do you recommend to couples who have completely different needs for their intimacy? Somebody might need that verbal or physical touch. Somebody just might need the head nod. Two completely different needs, and one might not understand the other's need. Like, how could you only need X when I need Y?
Right. Well, in truth, there are three entities to any relationship. There's you, there's me, and there's our relationship. And we as humans mistake. We tend to love others the way we want to be loved rather than the way they need to be loved. So we will focus on our own needs rather than our partner's needs, and we offer them what we want. So, the funny example of this is, for Christmas, I give you something, I give you a microwave because we need a microwave. That's not a gift for you. That's a gift for me or a gift for our household. And we're annoyed when our partner doesn't, fall down with gratitude about it. We have to actually tend to the person that we're married to, not the person we think they are or the person we wish they are. And so we need to pay attention to what we're doing, what we're contributing, and is it working? And that's another piece of intimacy, of really that deep, truly knowing, am I really seeing you? Am I really paying attention to you? Or am I just projecting what I think you should need? I need a hug, so I give you a hug. Well, that hug isn't for you, it's for me. And that is a mistake made over and over and over again. Even I do it. I'm a professional relationship person, and I sometimes offer my partner what I want. I make the dinner I feel like, or he makes the dinner he wants and says, here you go, here's this thing for you. Well, not actually for me, or not actually for you, it's for me. So that's part of what happens. So there is no problem in you want a hug and I need a handshake. I give you the hug because you need it. You give me the handshake because I need it, and everything's taken care of then.
So you're suggesting that I return the cooking lessons and vacuum I got from my wife for Christmas?
I am, in fact.
Okay, I'll dig the receipts out.
All right, there you go.
And my neighbor Maria, if you're listening, don't tell her I bought her that, please, because she'll kill me if you tell her. Carolyn, are there subtle patterns, habits, or warning signs that couples often overlook that slowly undermine closeness?
Yep. Avoiding hard conversations, avoiding being honest, glossing over saying we're fine when we're not, which we often note in ourselves before we see it in our partner. One of the things that happens is the sign is I'm not really listening anymore, and I'm not really looking at you anymore when we're sitting across from each other, because in truth, words can lie. Bodies never lie. So you can say I'm fine, but your body, your face, your tone tells a different story, and couples stop paying attention to each other. So that's the one thing is, am I really listening? Am I really seeing? Am I really tending to what is present in front of me? That's one of the clues that things are not going well. And if we're glossing over topics, not following up with deeper questions, that's another clue. And certainly if we're kidding ourselves about how fine we are when we say we're fine, that's the other signal.
And I just mentioned slowly undermining closeness. Infidelity is something that can, and usually does, instantly destroy intimacy. Mm-hmm. What percentage of couples reestablish true intimacy after infidelity?
100% of the couples that put in the work and that want that outcome. So that's not really the statistic. I think the statistic is anywhere between like 3% and 35 or 40%. But it's 100% of the people that want it. Sometimes, and Esther Perel is sort of the expert that I most often lean to. She has done a lot of really rich, amazing work about infidelity and the patterns of infidelity. But, sometimes infidelity is just an impulse. Sometimes it is really the canary, the giant canary in the coal mine of indicating that the relationship is really in trouble. So it varies what is happening. Some people use infidelity to get out of the relationship. Other people, it's a signal that we really need to do work. And so it depends on the cause of the infidelity. And then it more often than not, it depends on the couple that whether they want to fix it or not, and whether they're willing to do the work. But it can always be fixed if two people want it fixed and want to do the work to fix it.
Now, I mentioned before that I don't want to put you out of business, even though you said you're okay to be retired. But it does sound like you've got plenty of work to do to keep you busy for dozens of lifetimes.
Yes.
But how can couples rekindle emotional closeness without relying on therapy?
They can do a million things. It is paying attention to what does our relationship look like when we're doing well? What are we doing that is contributing to it? And how do we do more of that and different of that? So it is paying attention part and parcel and then making time for the relationship. It doesn't take a therapist. It doesn't take a workshop or a retreat. Those things, I would like to remove the stigma for doing the work with a therapist. There's nothing wrong with having the support of a therapist, but you can do it on your own as long as you are paying attention and investing the time and energy into it.
Now, you mentioned reducing that stigma or eliminating stigma. How do we do that as a society? Because everyone's like, oh my God, you're seeing a therapist. Then what's wrong with you?
I appreciate so much the people that are out there that are on the public stage acknowledging that they have done therapy, that they have a therapist. Thank you to, the famous couples out there that have acknowledged that, rather than this facade of our relationship is perfect and we don't need to do work. Those people aren't being honest. Their relationship isn't fine, or they're not, or they are doing the therapy, because couples are either doing the work and being healthy, or they're pretending, or they're not actually healthy. Those are the options out there. And so the more we can talk about it, normalize it, and that is a huge amount of what I do and talk about in my book, is sort of, here are the struggles that a relationship expert gets into. This is how it's hard. And I provide lots and lots of examples because I want people to know it just means you're human if you need help. And so the more we can talk about it, the better it is, because we get help in every other area of our life. We have professional mentors, we have personal trainers, we have language teachers, we have all of these things. But in our relationship, it means something bad about you to have a therapist. That's just false.
One last question before the break. There's the old saying that opposites attract, and that means there are a lot of couples who are vastly different. My wife and I being one of them.
Mm-hmm.
How can couples create intimacy if one partner is naturally less expressive or less affectionate?
You accept your partner where they are and get to know them as they are, rather than trying to turn them into a different version of you. And this is the mistake more couples than not make. We try and make our partner more like us. That's not intimacy. That's control and force, and not actually accepting each other. And so it is, let me understand you as you. And that may be, you talk more, you talk less. It's, how do I know you? If you express less verbally, how do I teach me how to know you so that I can love you in the way that feels good to you?
So it goes back to what I said earlier about more communication.
Mm-hmm. And communication is only about 35% verbal. Most of what we're communicating is nonverbal. So really, couples should be paying attention to what is not said more than they pay attention to what is said.
So I did way better in my Psych 101 class than I thought I did.
Excellent.
We've been talking to Carolyn Sharp. We'll be right back after a short break to talk about high conflict couples, Carolyn's career path, and her book, Fire It Up, 4 Secrets to Reigniting Intimacy and Enjoying Your Relationship. Stay right here. We'll be right back. We are back. I'm Chris Meek, host of Next Steps Forward, and my guest today is Carolyn Sharp. Carolyn is a licensed independent clinical social worker and a nationally recognized relationship expert with more than 30 years of experience helping couples, individuals, and teams build resilient connections. In 2005, Carolyn launched her private practice specializing in high conflict couples therapy. She's the award-winning author of Fire It Up, 4 Secrets to Reigniting Intimacy and Enjoying Your Relationship, and is a Psychology Today columnist. Carolyn, something that really caught my eye and sparked my curiosity about your work is the term high conflict couples. What's the definition of a high conflict couple, and what patterns or behaviors distinguish these couples from others?
As you would expect, a high conflict couple is someone who is a couple who fights a lot. They are continually in, arguments or struggles in a million different ways in their relationship. So this can be, couples that are yellers. Those are sort of what I call high arousal, or what Stan Tatkin, who coined the term originally, high arousal. Their nervous system is up. So they are people that are loud, they talk fast, they yell a lot. That is where their nervous system sort of rests, versus high conflict avoiders, which sounds counterintuitive, but people who are in conflict, but they're not actually verbalizing it. They're being passive aggressive. They're, nonverbal jabs at each other. They're, punishing each other in ways that aren't about yelling and screaming. So it's any couple that's in conflict more often than not. The majority of the time, their relationship struggles are conflict based.
And are high conflict couples, as you mentioned, always arguing in obvious ways, or is a conflict more subtle but still corrosive?
Both. Yeah. So it's both things. High conflict couples who are in verbal conflict with each other have more opportunity to heal and grow and have intimacy, because we know more about what's going on, versus the corrosive, nonverbal, passive aggressive, where we're not actually saying what's going on. We're just, avoiding each other or treating each other poorly, or all that sort of stuff. That is in some ways more damaging. Of course, if you are name calling, if you are threatening, if you are doing these things, those are really damaging as well, in really hurtful and abusive ways. But nonverbal conflict can be more damaging to your relationship in a lot of ways.
So avoiding the issue versus addressing it
Mm-hmm.
could be more harmful than actually getting into a throwdown, yelling, screaming.
Yeah. I mean, it just depends on the people, because if, I grew up in New York, not far from where you are, and, sarcasm and yelling and all that sort of stuff was, normal. So it isn't something, a raised voice doesn't bother me. My husband grew up in Southern California, where appearances and niceness and pleasant stuff was more sort of the culture. And so that was more reading between the lines, less processing. So for him, raised voices is sort of scary, not in a, physically threatening way, but it's very unsettling for him. So we have had to negotiate and learn how to resolve conflict, because he'll go quiet where I'll go bigger and more verbal. And so we've had to process and negotiate, how do we resolve conflict?
So I normally ask guests who are from New York, but now live in Massachusetts at the beginning of the show, but didn't feel it was appropriate given the opening. Yankees or Red Sox?
Red Sox. 100%.
So I normally would have pulled the plug at the
You're
beginning
gonna
of the
kick me off
show. Yeah. So Jordan, we're going to cancel it from here. We're going to go to commercial break for the next 25 minutes. Carolyn, what I tell people who are Red Sox fans, it's just a phase. You're going to outgrow it. You're still a nice person. There's still hope for you. But you might get more coal this year for Christmas than we Yankee fans, but we'll just leave it at that.
Boston Red Sox, since the day I was born till the day I'm a Red Sox. And even, my parents, right after they got married, lived up here. And so we were raised Red Sox fans. Sorry.
What's wrong?
Not sorry.
Fair enough. All right. Well, again, you're still a nice person. We'll move on.
Thank you.
Are there certain personality traits or emotional tendencies that are more common in high conflict people?
I mean, yes and no. There are more often, there are some cultural differences. And again, I sort of alluded to this in terms of people who grew up having that be normal. People who are, yellers tend to be loud talkers. There are people that, there are some variations, but I try really hard not to label or live on stereotypes, because it prevents me from being curious about where you learned your communication skills, where you learned how to be, what emotional needs you are trying to meet. Because one of the universal truths is every behavior is an attempt by a human to meet a need. So if I yell, it's because I don't feel heard talking at a lower volume. It becomes an automatic thing that's just the way I talk. But in relationship, we tend to just label, you're a yeller, I'm not going to pay attention to you, which actually makes the yelling worse. We tend to make assumptions about what it means about people and stop being curious about, what is this? Why are you doing that? What can I understand about you as a result of this behavior that you have? So there are some universal truths or behavioral characteristics of people in high conflict couples. It more often means that there's a disconnect between them where they are not successfully meeting each other's needs. If the high conflict is a problem, for some couples, the yelling is just sort of the way they communicate, and they're fine with it. It doesn't actually cause problems. They're in, sometimes in working with high conflict couples, I learned that the conflict isn't the problem. How they are intimate is the problem, or how they meet each other's needs is the problem. But the yelling isn't actually bothersome to either of them. In other cases, and this is more common, where you have one high conflict person, one, like me, who was raised in a yelling family, and another person who wasn't yelled at, then the conflict is a problem, because the way they resolve conflict is unhappy, unsettling, unsafe for one, and the other person has to adapt and address, because emotional safety is the fundamental need for there to be intimacy, because you can't be truly known if you don't feel safe to be known.
Well, and that's a great example. You mentioned about how you grew up in a family that was, not high conflict, but yellers, or high tone, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And that's how you are.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find it where, and you're, I guess, an example here, that gets passed on to their children, the next generation, and then that's just sort of what they know, and it's a learned behavior, and that's sort of what they expect?
Mm-hmm.
And that is that's how it gets difficult.
Yep. That is what attachment theory is really all about. How we are taught to be, how we are in relationship through how we experienced relationship in our early lives. And depending on what you're talking about and who you're, the theorists, from 0 to 18 months or 0 to 24 months, where those patterns are really most profoundly laid down. We continue to learn into, adulthood about relationships, but that is what we learn: how to be in relationship, how to get our needs met, how to express our emotions, whether we're worthy of care, whether we're, our needs matter, all that sort of stuff. We learn a pattern from our parents or caregivers, and that is what we then look for to reproduce in our adult relationships, most prominently our adult romantic relationships. We look for what feels similar in the quality of the relationship. And often this is sort of reduced to, you marry your mother, or you marry your father. It's less that than you marry the dynamic, you marry the experience of being in relationship. And so, not surprisingly to me, my parents had different ways of communicating and different ways of, one was more direct, one was more, quiet or passive. And I have reenacted that in the relationships I have had, where that's the dynamic in relationship. One is the chaser, one is the avoider, one is the direct conflict, one is the, conflict avoider. That reenactment is how we learn and grow, recognizing that it's happening and then deciding with intention to create something different.
Well, maybe as a follow-up to that, because you just went through a lot of different scenarios in terms of couple dynamics. There's the old saying, opposites attract.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true?
It's less that opposites attract than we attract, which is familiar. And so if you were raised in a family where your two parents were very different, you're going to find yourself in a relationship where you're very different from your partner. Or where the difference was a problem, then difference becomes a challenge, that sort of thing. So we attract, and this is so interesting. This brain science is really, really interesting to me. When we are seeking out when we're in dating, our brain is seeking out genetic difference because we're looking to spread the seed, sort of, keep a healthy species. And that's in the hookup or the dating time. When our brain switches to pair bonding or mating for life, our brain switches from looking for difference to looking for familiarity. What feels familiar to me in terms of creating a life, and the brain actually switches in what it's looking for. So it's fascinating. Dating is 6 to 18 months long. That's how long courtship is, and then we switch to pair bonding, and the brain actually makes a switch, and what we're looking for changes. And this is unconscious. This isn't like, I think I'll look for what is familiar to me. It's happening at an unconscious level, and that's just endlessly fascinating. So we pick what we expect is normal in relationship, and then we end up frustrated years later because this isn't what I want. I'm in my parents' marriage. Well, how did I get here? Well, that's what you're taught to expect is normal.
So you don't say it's 14 months time for me to go look for a lifetime partner?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Have you ever experienced anything where somebody in a couple, maybe they grew up with parents that are in a household that didn't show a lot of emotion or wasn't that intimate as a family, but that person was really looking for that emotion or intimacy, and they became in that couple as in a married couple wanting more or looking for more intimacy, and just sort of like maybe that caused the conflict?
Yeah, that's one of a million examples. We sort of wake up, if you will, and realize I want more. Man, this feels familiar, and this isn't what I want anymore. I want more. Often, and again, this is an American cultural thing where immediate gratification and wanting it to be, fixed immediately, and social media doesn't help with this, that it should be easy and I shouldn't settle. And so leave him, leave her, get something better. The grass is greener on the other side, but growth and learning comes from staying put and doing the work to create the health in your relationship. We assume that, all right, I want something different. I can't have it with my partner. I should go find it elsewhere, not recognizing that dynamic has been co-created. If I'm unsatisfied with the emotional intimacy we have, I have to recognize I've contributed to the emotional intimacy that we have or don't have. I haven't been vulnerable. I haven't created safety. I have participated in this as well. So it's going to take me changing, and it's going to take you changing. It's going to take us changing to create a new dynamic. It is always possible. Couples are too quick to give up their relationship. And, I break couples, or not, I don't break them up, but I help them break themselves up all the time. It's not my favorite part of the job, but it is an important part of my job to help couples realize they don't want to be here anymore. And there's no shame in walking away. I'm a divorced person. I'm, married for the second time. There is no shame in deciding you've outgrown a relationship together and you want something different, but couples leave too soon before really doing the work to create the transformation. And when they leave too soon, they're going to recreate that problem in their next relationship without fail. So that was a lot of information for you.
History, it's what we're here for. So to that point, history kind of repeats itself if they don't go far enough along the path of doing the work.
Correct.
And maybe as a follow-up to that, how far down that path do couples go as you're, for lack of a better word, evaluating them in the state of their relationship before either you realize or they realize maybe it's time to go separate ways?
It's one of the first things I assess for, because sometimes couples come to see me for permission to leave. And it's a sad and painful thing when two people come into my office, virtually or in person, and one of them is excited to grow, and the other person, I can tell in the first 15 minutes, oh, they're here for me to break them up. Whenever there is ambivalence present, that is the first thing that has to be addressed, because creating health in your relationship requires vulnerability and hard work. And if someone is ambivalent about doing that work, that's not going to create the safety necessary for true transformation to take place. So I have to clear that out of the room. And so if anybody's uncertain about whether they want to continue, like not believing that it's possible, that's not really ambivalence, that's fear. But the ambivalence of, I'm not sure I want to do the work, I'm not sure I want you anymore, that has to be cleared out first thing. So it's even before I meet with them, I'm sussing out in my consult calls with couples, like, how serious are you? How committed are you? All that stuff, to make sure that I'm not actually confusing what my job is.
And as part of that process, that consult, do you make them get to the point where they verbally say this isn't working, or do you have to verbally tell them this isn't working?
It's sometimes it isn't working, and that needs to be said. Sometimes it's, I don't want it to work, and that's the harder thing, getting people to say, because most people don't want to hurt their partner, they don't want to cause pain, and it is, it's a hard thing to say, I don't want to be here anymore. And it varies. Sometimes I have to make them say it, because it's, I can say it, and sometimes they want me to be the one because they don't want to be the bad guy. But it's important for the person themselves to own it, to say, I don't want it anymore. I'm sorry, but I don't want to do the work. And there are tells if someone is being not honest. Like I said, words can lie, bodies don't lie. So I'm pretty good at reading the situation. If eye contact, body language, all that sort of stuff will tell me whether they're just telling me what they think, or telling their partner what they think they want to hear, or if they're being genuine and honest. And sometimes people don't even know, and that's the harder thing, is I don't think you actually want this anymore, even though you're saying you do. I don't think you're giving yourself permission.
Well, for you personally, how do you handle that? Like, that's a lot for you to sit and process and weigh on, knowing that you're part of a major change in a couple's life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was very touched by your intro, and felt it deeply. And I didn't know any of the people in Sydney, Australia, and I didn't know any of the students at Brown. But there is grief in knowing that people are in pain, and it is certainly, grief is one of the hardest things to help people with, as a therapist and as a person, as a friend. I'm sure you've lost people and known people who've lost people, because there's not a lot we can do for anybody that's going through grief. You just are providing a space and a witness. So it's a hard feeling, but it's an important feeling to be there with people when they're doing it, and knowing that, I believe that and maybe this is a little woo-woo, but people end up where they need to go. And so I am just an important vehicle. I don't know if that's the right word, to help people get where they need to go. And sometimes it's painful to, like, blow up a situation, but more often than not, it needs to be blown up. I don't want people to be in a relationship that isn't right, that isn't happy, that isn't healthy. And in the case of someone who wants transformation with a partner that doesn't, everyone deserves to be with someone who's willing to go to bat for them, and do the work. And it's painful letting go when someone isn't there, but it's important.
Everyone deserves to be happy.
Everyone deserves to be happy.
Your book is titled Fire It Up: 4 Secrets to Reigniting Intimacy and Joy in Your Relationship. What is the Fire It Up principle in your book, and does it connect to what you do in packed sessions with couples?
It does. It is based in packed almost entirely. It's just I created, in the pandemic, I created a coaching program for couples to go through before they needed therapy. And the idea that, there were some themes and common occurrences that happen for couples. And so let me create a program where they can build health before they need a therapist. And Fire It Up is sort of borrowing from the metaphor of, if anybody's gone camping out there, there are 3 things. My scientist husband will tell me the science and the chemistry behind it, that a fire needs to be healthy. It needs oxygen, it needs ignition, and it needs fuel, not in that order, in order for a fire to burn. And then fourth, it needs a foundation, a campfire, a fireplace for that fire to safely live. And so those four things in relationship, the foundation is the principles and agreements and goals that make us us. That is why we are a couple in the first place and what we want our relationship to be. That defines why we're doing this work in the first place. And it holds us together. Oxygen is the acceptance, the understanding and acceptance of who we each are, so that we can be safe to grow and evolve together. It is also the right amount of time together and time apart, that sort of breathing room, if you will, for each of us to develop as people and for us to be connected. So that's oxygen. Fuel is communication. It is commitment. It is security in the relationship. So it's how do we talk to each other? How do we clean up our messes when we make a mess? How do we create the systems that keep us moving in a healthy way? That's how we feed our relationship. And then ignition is the fun. It's the play. It's the romance. It's the sexiness. It's the je ne sais quoi, if you will, that makes us different from every other relationship we have in our life. What distinguishes us from our friends or our colleagues or whatever, it's what makes our relationship special. So that's how you fire it up.
Let's fire it up.
Let's fire it up.
I feel like, who was the chef, Emerald or Guy Fieri?
Yeah, right.
Can couples start practicing the book strategies on their own?
Yeah, absolutely. It's got 27 exercises in the appendix that they can do on their own. That's why I wrote it, so that they don't have to do counseling. They don't have to do coaching. They can just buy the book and practice the exercises.
In perfect segue there, we're almost at the end of our conversation. Please tell us how we can contact you or buy a copy of your book, Fire It Up, 4 Secrets to Reigniting Intimacy and Join Your Relationship.
Well, the book is available anywhere books are sold. So your famous best online retailer has a copy. So does the independent online bookseller, bookshop.org. So do your local booksellers can get it. And my website has it, or you can buy it directly from me. And my website is secureconnectionsretreats.com. And from there, you can find me on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and all of the places online. Secure Connections Coaching is where I am on all of the social media apps.
But we said social media is the devil.
We did, and I'm going to be I always take a break in January. So, but my email, they can find me. I'm not hard to find. Perfect.
Carolyn, what are your parting words of wisdom here as we head into the new year? What gives you hope for 2026?
My hope for 2026 for all of us is that we use curiosity and compassion more than we are, and remember that we all need connection. And then, for the couples out there, for anybody in relationships don't take care of themselves. Don't take your relationships for granted. Invest in them. It's the best thing we can do for our health.
Curiosity, compassion, connection. I love
3
that.
C's. Yeah.
I love that. Carolyn Sharp, author of Fire It Up, 4 Secrets to Reigniting Intimacy and Joining a Relationship. Thank you so much for being with us today. It was a real pleasure and honor.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. It was a great conversation, and I won't hold the Yankees against you, I promise.
Well, I was going to say I got through half the questions today. Part of that was because I took you down a bad rabbit hole, but I'll have you back during the baseball season, and we'll see how many games back the Red Sox are behind the Yankees.
Oh, dear.
Well, and thanks to our viewers and listeners. I'm Chris Meek. We'll see you next week, same time, same place. Until then, stay safe and keep taking your next steps.